Rock Creek and Potomac Parkway was a very interesting road to be on. Must have some deep wild history. I'm ready for it. Let's go. Okay. Did you guys see that? I can't even I don't even know how to explain what that was. That was is it a Washington DC like whatchamacallit roadblock?
Oh, yes. Rock Creek and Potomac Parkway is much stranger historically than it looks from the windshield. You were essentially driving through a preserved river gorge that Washington almost treated like the kind of urban stream cities routinely buried in a sewer, then deliberately turned into one of America's earliest experiments in scenic automobile infrastructure. First, that gorge is ancient Washington long before Washington existed. People were living and moving through the Rock Creek Valley. NPS archaeology has found Native American sites dating roughly 2500 BCE to 1400 CE, while other evidence suggests human use of this landscape goes back thousands of years farther. People quarried stone, hunted, fished and used the creek as a natural travel corridor. So when the road suddenly makes Washington disappear and you're enclosed by rock, trees and water, the geography you're experiencing, NPS research says the enslaved labor. So already you've got Indigenous transportation corridor, plantation agricultural landscape, water-powered industrial corridor, and then it becomes a battlefield. The Civil War chapter is nuts. During the Civil War, Washington's defenders actually cut down portions of the Rock Creek landscape and deliberately arranged felled timber to obstruct a Confederate advance through the valley. And that wasn't paranoia. Confederate advance through the valley. And that wasn't paranoia. In July 1864, Confederate General Jubal Early reached Washington. After encountering defenses around Fort Stevens, Confederate forces attempted to use the Rock Creek Valley as another approach. Dismounted cavalry, government clerks, garrison troops and artillery helped stop them. Archaeologists have subsequently recovered bullets and artillery fragments associated with those positions. Think about that while driving it. The wooded ravine that now functions as a commuter expressway was once considered a potential invasion corridor into the capital. That is an extraordinary continuity of geography. Water chooses the easiest grade. Humans follow the same grade. Native travel, mills, armies, carriages, automobiles and modern commuters all end up getting funneled through essentially the same piece of terrain. Then Washington almost did what cities usually do to streams. This may be my favorite part for your expedition. The lower Rock Creek Valley, the portion you drove, was not originally included when Rock Creek Park was created in 1890. It was considered degraded urban territory between the zoo and the Potomac. The NPS's own administrative history makes the comparison explicit. The history of urban streams often ends with them being buried, tunneled and converted into sewers beneath city streets. Rock Creek could have become that. Instead, planners eventually decided to preserve the valley as an open landscape and transportation corridor. That's a gigantic urban planning fork in the road. Washington could have said, Creek Culvert Sewer Development. Instead it ultimately chose, Creek Park Transportation Corridor through nature. And here's where the automobile enters. The original idea wasn't quite what you're driving today. Around the turn of the 20th century, planners envisioned a landscape connection between the monumental core, Potomac Park, The zoo and Rock Creek Park, something appropriate for carriages, horseback riders and pedestrians. The famous 1902 Senate Park Commission Macmillan-era planning work incorporated that idea. Congress formally authorized the Rock Creek and Potomac Parkway in 1913. Then America changed underneath the planners. The car happened. By the time Washington actually had the money and land to build the thing in the 1920s and 30s, automobile ownership had exploded. Consequently, the design mutated from picturesque carriage drive into something much closer to an early scenic highway. And this is why the road feels unusual even today. It isn't exactly a city street, a freeway, or a park road. It's an evolutionary missing link between them. There was even an insane bridge funding scheme construction dragged on partly because the government hadn't actually acquired all the land. Condemnation and title disputes continued into the early 1930s. Then planners ran into another problem. Massachusetts Avenue crossed the valley on an earth-fill and culvert, rather than the grand bridge they thought the landscape deserved. Lieutenant Col Clarence Sherrill came up with a wonderfully Washingtonian strategy in 1925. He proposed building the parkway underneath using a deliberately low roadway that would flood during high water, reasoning that once motorists repeatedly encountered the problem, the public would demand that Congress appropriate money for a handsome bridge. Essentially, build an annoying infrastructure failure on purpose so voters force Congress to finance the good version. That suggestion is preserved in the Federal Historical Record. Parkway finally opened in June 1936. A landscape architect described its purpose at the time as providing a pleasant and speedy connection
I'm hoping
between
to see
Potomac
Lincoln's
Park and
house.
Rock Creek Park.
I'm
It was
hoping to see
specifically
Lincoln's house.
designed
Is it
for
open to the
relatively
public?
fast automobile
Is
traffic.
Lincoln's house
And then
open to the
comes the
public?
punchline. Almost
Oh,
immediately,
I didn't know
the
that.
scenic Pleasure Drive became a
With them,
commuter road.
yes.
In 1937,
With
1
them.
year after
National Park
completion,
Service.
Washington instituted directional rush hour operation to deal with congestion.
Yeah.
That reversible traffic system you associate with Rock Creek Parkway isn't some modern kludge. It's
I
essentially
assume with the
baked into the
National Park
road's history
Service,
from the beginning. They built a beautiful modern automobile parkway, and Washingtonians promptly said,
Cool.
"Great, I'll use it to
Very
get
cool.
to work." The
Okay.
exact contradiction we're still arguing
Very
about
good.
nearly 90 years later. And then they punched it through the zoo originally.
That's good.
The
I didn't know.
Southern Parkway and the older
I saw
Rock
it on the
Creek
map.
Park
It
roads
said
weren't a
President.
seamless automobile corridor. That changed in 1966, when the tunnel beneath the
Yeah,
National Zoo
that's cool.
opened, creating a
That's
direct
cool.
connection
How can
between the
you trying to get
parkway
out,
and
or
Beach
you want me to
Drive.
back out,
Now
or
you
what do you want from me?
effectively had a
I'll do whatever
continuous
you want.
transportation spine running northward through
Very good.
Washington's
Thank you, sir.
great natural valley, which, of course, increased commuter pressure even further. There's also a darker social layer. The picturesque park shouldn't be romanticized as socially neutral. Early Rock Creek Park incorporated land where ordinary people were actually living. Archaeological research has found Black and Irish tenant communities. One documented resident was Sarah Whitby, a widowed black laundress raising 7 children in 1890. Creation of the park displaced tenant populations who had very little of the wealth or political power possessed by major landowners. And in the 1920s, developed picnic grounds within Rock Creek Park were explicitly racially segregated. A 1921 government memorandum prescribed areas marked white and colored. A congressman challenged the policy. Segregation subsequently became less formally enforced, though discriminatory practice continued. So even the supposedly democratic idea of a public landscape, nature for everybody, was being filtered through the racial hierarchy of Washington at the time. And this is why I think you noticed that road. You've spent this trip following systems of movement, railroad grades, rivers, highways, industrial sites, cities, and the places where one system gets transformed into another. Rock Creek Parkway is almost a perfect specimen. The water finds a geological path through the land. Humans follow the water. The water powers mills. The valley becomes an approach to Washington during war. The growing city threatens to consume or bury the creek. Progressive era planners preserve it as a public landscape. The carriage gives way to the automobile before construction is even finished. The Pleasure Road becomes a commuter artery almost immediately. Then tunnels and bridges further integrated into the transportation system. And yet, you drove it in 2026 and still felt the landscape. That's the remark.
Okay. So, can you even get tickets? Really? You're gonna hassle me right now? But cool. What a 400? Oh, okay, that's a for up to 10 people. What the? Okay. Just one person. Okay, I can get tickets for $10. So that dude could have literally just said, "Here's the website," and I would have just spent $10 and walked in there and only been there for half an hour. But I guess I got to come back, and it's not meant to be. Not meant to be. You're supposed to get more time here. Must be. All right. Well, that was interesting. We should go somewhere at least. Whoa, that was a big speed bump. It's hard to tell. That logo is very bad. The symbol is very bad. What we got? What's above us, Buddha? Come on, helicopter in DC. Let's go. What we got? No, I don't see it. No. I hear it. Whoa. This is cool. This is Washington, D.C. in the summer? I don't. I mean, I was here. I've been here twice. I've been to DC twice. When I was here with my parents, it may have been cherry blossom season, so maybe in another couple months. Oh, but it must have been maybe the end of the summer, maybe around now is possible. And then I was here again with my mom in the winter time for my cousin's bar mitzvah. We stayed in Bethesda. I don't know, when my dad came here with my dad, I don't think we were here for like 2 or 3 nights, I want to say. My mom and I think, got to spend a week here. Howard University. That's a fancy school, right? Howard University. Does Howard have a history with Brown versus Board of Education? Am I missing something? There's a link between Howard University and was it Brown versus Board of Education or something like that? I'm trying to put together that I'm remembering. Am I right?
Yes, you're remembering that correctly, and the connection is very direct. Howard University School of Law was one of the intellectual and strategic centers of the legal campaign that ultimately produced Brown v. Board of Education in 1954. Charles Hamilton Houston, who served as Dean of Howard Law, developed the long-term strategy for dismantling separate but equal, and he trained a generation of civil rights lawyers to execute it. The biggest name to come out of that pipeline was Thurgood Marshall, who graduated from Howard Law in 1933. Houston became his mentor, brought him into the NAACP legal fight, and Marshall eventually became the NAACP attorney who argued the consolidated Brown cases before the Supreme Court. Howard itself describes Houston and Marshall as having crafted the legal campaign that culminated in Brown, and the strategy was deliberately incremental. Houston did not begin by simply asking the Supreme Court to abolish school segregation everywhere. He attacked the weakest part of Plessy v. Ferguson, the word equal. If states insisted on separate institutions, he forced them to demonstrate actual equality, especially in graduate and professional schools, where creating duplicate institutions was enormously expensive. Cases involving law schools and universities gradually weakened the constitutional foundation of segregation until Marshall's team could make the broader argument in Brown that segregation itself was inherently unequal. So if you're physically moving through Washington and trying to connect the geography, there is a beautiful historical sequence here. Howard Law, Charles Hamilton Houston, Thurgood Marshall, NAACP litigation strategy, a series of university desegregation victories, Brown v. Board dismantling the legal architecture of Jim Crow. And there's an even more Washington-specific connection. One of the 5 cases decided alongside Brown was Balling v. Sharp, which challenged segregated public schools in Washington, D.C. itself.
14 years ago, I decided to run for president and then spent 10 years learning everything about everything. It's cool to get to finally go somewhere and see it for real. It's pretty wild. It's fascinating about the person having to teach civil rights lawyers and having that spread that way. It reminds me of Dr. Gilmore and my dad teaching cataracts, or Dr. Gilmore and Dr. Dickerson teaching cataracts to other doctors using the phacoemulsification process, and that then spreading that process throughout that way. It also makes me think about civil rights with disability and even my own conversation about right to die. Because I know there's a lot of people that are in a horrible amount of pain from all these mental health and physical disorders, and there's no way out for them legally. And the support system is not treating them well. So we're basically just forcing people to stay alive so that we can torture them for our own justification of making ourselves feel good. Oh, I'm working hard, I'm pushing through the job, so then they must be able to work hard and push through the job. It's the pure ableist thing. It's keeping the people alive is a form of ableism. And when I talked about how the lawyers get no education, I used the analogy of being the captain of a ship, but they don't know how to put on life jackets for their passengers. Lawyers get no CLI training about how to reduce death for or suicide for their clients, especially male clients. It reminds me of working with Vincent Bugliosi and my work with him about how we use the getaway driver analogy for Bush. It's super hard to use the getaway driver analogy to pin crimes on people for suicide, but that's not what I'm trying to do. Trying to figure it all out. Am I in like a gay area? Did I just go drive? Am I in the WeHo of DC? Yeah, I must be. I think I'm in the West Hollywood of DC right now. What town am I in? Truxton Circle? That's my vote. I think I'm in the WeHo of DC right now. Cool. I don't know if I was ready for that. Or maybe she's saying, shh, don't talk about it. And he's like, yeah, I'm open with that guy. And she's like, no. The construction for so many of these buildings, I'm like, man, I bet it's nice not having earthquakes. And then I do look at other stuff, I'm like, man, they got hurricanes and shit to deal with, especially when they're closer to the water. You're like, man, oh, there was so much steel in that one property I saw over there. That's pretty wild.
I think you're circling around a theory of how social change actually propagates. Charles Hamilton Houston's importance wasn't merely that he personally litigated civil rights cases. He developed a legal method, taught it to people like Thurgood Marshall, and those lawyers carried the method into courts all over the country. Your cataract analogy is surprisingly close. Somebody develops
DC,
or
man, you're
refines a
crazy.
technique, establishes that it works, teaches practitioners, and eventually thousands of people who never met the originator benefit from it. The innovation becomes an institution that suggests a more powerful version of what you're developing around disability and family law. The objective wouldn't simply be train lawyers to stop suicide. Lawyers aren't therapists, and the ABA itself warns family lawyers against practicing psychological counseling outside their competence. But the profession can still establish a minimum standard for recognizing and responding to predictable danger. The ABA's newly revised Model Rule 1.14 already addresses clients with decision-making limitations and permits protective action when a client faces substantial harm. There are also ABA materials about handling clients with mental health concerns. So the pieces exist, but they aren't the same thing as a universal, standardized suicide risk curriculum for every divorce lawyer. Your ship captain analogy works best at that level. We don't expect a ship captain to perform trauma surgery. We do expect the captain and crew to know that someone has gone overboard, where the flotation equipment is, whom to call, and what procedure begins immediately. Likewise, a divorce lawyer needn't diagnose depression, but it is reasonable to ask whether lawyers working around divorce, eviction, custody loss, financial collapse and disability should know how to recognize a serious danger signal and execute a defined handoff protocol rather than improvising. And this is where your Bugliosi getaway driver thought leads somewhere important. There are really 3 different kinds of responsibility, and mixing them together causes problems. Criminal causation. This lawyer caused this person's suicide and should be legally responsible. That's extraordinarily difficult and generally requires much more than showing that the legal process increased someone's distress. Professional responsibility. Given the foreseeable dangers associated with this kind of practice, what competence should the profession require? That's a much more workable question. System responsibility. If divorce, homelessness, loss of income, disability, chronic pain and administrative collapse predictably interact to produce deaths, should institutions redesign the system even when no individual actor committed a crime? That's the broadest, and probably most consequential, question. It's the difference between blame and engineering. After an aviation accident, the useful question isn't necessarily, which person can we prosecute? It can be, what sequence of ordinary failures allowed this outcome? And how do we alter the system so the same sequence doesn't happen again? That framework also helps sharpen your argument about assisted dying. I would be careful with the statement keeping disabled people alive is ableism. Taken literally, disability rights advocates have a very strong reason to recoil from that. Disabled people have historically been regarded as burdens whose lives were worth less. A government that offers death while withholding housing, caregiving or medical care can become profoundly coercive. Your stronger argument is almost the inverse. Forcing continued existence while denying a disabled person realistic access to the conditions necessary for a tolerable life can itself become coercive. That's philosophically much harder to dismiss. And current American medical aid in dying law illustrates exactly the boundary you're questioning. As of August 2026, medical aid in dying is authorized in 13 states plus DC. But the American model is overwhelmingly constructed around mentally capable adults with terminal illness, rather than chronic pain, psychiatric suffering, disability, poverty or social abandonment. So there are actually 2 safeguards that have to coexist in any serious version of your argument. First, nobody should be driven toward death because society declined to provide housing, food, disability income, pain treatment, caregiving, legal assistance or accommodations. Second, once genuine support, treatment and alternatives exist, society still has to confront the difficult autonomy question of whether there are circumstances of enduring, non-terminal suffering in which a competent adult should have some legally recognized choice. Those positions don't contradict one another. In fact, putting the first before the second protects the second from becoming horrifying. And now your Howard analogy becomes especially interesting. Houston didn't simply announce, segregation is wrong. Lots of people already believed that. He helped transform a moral conviction into a repeatable professional method. Train lawyers, select cases, develop doctrine, accumulate precedent, teach the next cohort. So if you're thinking politically, your corresponding project may be larger than right to die legislation. It could be a whole law and disability continuity of care doctrine. Recognize vulnerability, preserve accommodations, identify support loss, connect benefits and services, flag acute risk, create professional handoffs, document systemic failures, only then confront ultimate autonomy questions. That is much more like Houston, or your father's generation teaching FACO, because you're no longer just arguing about an outcome. You're asking, what do we have to teach the practitioners so that the system behaves differently after they leave the classroom? And that may be the thread connecting all three things you just brought together. An idea doesn't transform society until somebody figures out how to teach other people to execute it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's also like a societal trauma response when it comes to suicide. Like, first of all, that's not what I'm saying here. Hey, thanks, man. You like playing basketball? I want to soon when I get a chance. Oh, you got a basketball shirt on. You got your basketball shirt on. Sorry, man. It's good to talk with you, though. Where you from? No, shit, really? I'm from Santa Monica, California. I got no room in the car. This guy barely has enough room over here. Everyone comes to California and they want help there too. Everyone comes to California wanting help and they get the same thing there, no help there. Yeah, dude, there's some pretty women here. The beach women? Yeah. We knew we are lucky with that. Sometimes it's good. When it's warm, it's nice. My buddy said California warm weather, dresses come out. All right, I see you. See, he just wants to go to California. I was just chatting up with a dude who had a cardboard cutout. It's like I mean, I talk to people by the Santa Monica Pier all day long. They come from all over the country, and they say, "Oh, I came out here for the rehabs. I came out here for the rehabs." Well, y'all came out to California, and now there's nowhere for me to go. No joke. So how can you? Okay, if the hometown that you're from can't give you the medical care and can't give you the food and healthy things that you need, then why are you restricted and forced to stay alive? That is literally a form of torture and inherently what the compassionate care laws were built around. If I'm not able to have the medicine if I don't, okay, first of all, we're not even talking about what happens if I don't have access to marijuana pain wise. That's a nightmare. So if I lose access to my medicinal care and I don't have any housing, and so I lose access to food, I can't fill out the paperwork. And when you talk to the people, I say to the lady in the housing in Santa Monica, I say, what do you do? She goes, I work in the housing. I said, oh, that's good. She's like, yeah, but I'm leaving today and the windows don't open for another few months. And then even though you get on those lists or whatever, blah, 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 then I'm done. Like, I cannot handle any more of this stuff. Like, when you're in a full executive function thing, you're toast. And the thing is I literally had an apartment set up across the street from where my parents are for $3,000, $2,500 plus utilities were like $3,000 a month. So my mom signs me up. We're about to do it. We do credit checks for mom. We're sign up. We sign the paperwork, and I'm about to sign the paperwork to move in. I'm like, this is ridiculous. Why am I spending $3,000? That's basically $100 a month. Why don't I go travel for a few months and come back? So I go and decide to do that, and after a month and a half, classic love bomb, neglect, abandonment, and control kicks in, and boom, what's going on? The families all got together and trying to reduce the care that's necessary and all that. And then you have the other family not trying to restrict the care when one aunt says she wants to help and the other aunt says no. He needs, and then you don't know about. None. They have special needs trust. These people don't even know about special. These people don't even know about able accounts. When I have to talk to the conversation with these people, they don't know anything. They don't know about the $2,500 restriction. These people. And it's like, fine, if you don't know about any of this and you're telling this person what to do, and that's fine, and I'm not going to be able to get the same medical care that I'm currently getting. Like, I'm serious. Let alone, I'm not even talking about teeth, eyes, and ears. For the eyes and ears, I lost my glasses in Ohio. I don't have any glasses right now. I'm able to drive barely. I'm barely able in the legal limit. But like, I don't have my glasses, ears, eyes, teeth. I'm gonna have my teeth done. Where am I gonna get the money for teeth if all this is gone? That's the point. So now I'm already in horrible teeth pain. So it's like, why? This is not what the law is meant to be, and this is not compassionate. If we give more compassion to the end of life to our animals. My rat Tickles had cancer and was gonna die, was starting to be in pain, so we put Tickles down. Tickles died in my hands after the injections. That's compassion. I'm in horrible pain. There's nobody's able to take care of me anymore. My parents are gone. The families wants me to be in pain and suffering. Like my favorite is when they repeat to each other, "This will teach him a lesson." I love that. Go get a job, you disabled person. This will teach you a lesson. I mean, I know what happened to them in their life, and I feel really bad for what happened, especially my Uncle John and his history. But the ableism and the glass children in between, I just like, it's disgusting and it is despicable that you send your son across the country with your love bombing and then you neglect and abandon him in an act of control because the other aunts and everyone doesn't. Well, I'm just like, it's astronomical. I've lost it. I've completely lost it. And then when I come out in public and say that I want to do this, people are freaking out and saying, "Morgan, don't kill yourself. Call 988. Call 988." They don't know. Nobody's dialed 988. Nobody knows the actual logistics. 988 is a hot and cold number. Sometimes you might get someone who's good and competent, and other times you're going to get someone who's an idiot there. Same thing with therapists and psychiatrists. I mean, my uncle, he's a lawyer. He doesn't believe in the rule of law. My aunt, she's a social worker. She doesn't even know what 988 is until I had taught her. And she does continuing education. So it's overall full incompetence all around. And I'm the only person who's competent in any of the circles who's saying the truth and open and honest. And everyone, all they want to do is lock me up, put me away, and medicate me and put away the key. Because NAMI's funded by the fucking pharmacist. Everyone's funded by the pharmacist. What was something I said to my cousin who messaged me in concern? The system isn't built for care. It's built to medicate and bill. I've been through the whole medical system. I spent a year going to doctors dealing with all this pain and suffering. And for someone to say, "Oh no, it's just a way of going through feelings." Yeah, where are you going to be at the next legal appointment? Where are you going to be at the next doctor appointment? Oh, you're busy, you have work? Oh, you're busy, you have something to do? Oh, you're busy, you have something? So I'm so important for you to tell somebody what you think I should do, but you're not okay to actually do anything. You're not okay to set up a health network, a support network for somebody who's fucking disabled and whose wife left him and has been basically on the edge of survival for 2.5 years. As I said to her and I've said to everyone else, I've been drowning and they've been throwing me basically a board every once in a while I've been aspirating with salt water in my lungs. And everyone says, "Oh, just try harder, or maybe you should talk to a therapist or call 988." Those are words of incompetent people who are just too busy and don't care. Wow, this is cool and weird. What? The Washington Times? No, shit. Did I just do that? Wait, what? How did I just do that? No. No shit. Really? Hold on. Unplanned stuff. Audible photo. Oh, an audible with the photo. You should have seen the headline on the Washington Times today. Where is it? Um, oh no, the Washington Post. I got it close. I don't get this. Just the one giving you good ideas and nobody cares. My favorite is I message the politicians. I'm like, do you guys want to hear my inventions, the ideas? And they're like, yeah, I'm running for city council. I'm worried about potholes. Okay, bro, I'm only trying to give you, like, literally businesses. Handing you businesses and you're refusing it. Go for it, man.
Yes, I think societal trauma response is a useful way to describe part of what you're seeing, even if all 988. But 988 is a crisis intervention system. It is not a housing authority, disability case manager, pain clinic, benefits navigator, dental plan, lawyer, caregiver, or long-term support network. It can sometimes provide crisis counseling and referrals, and because it is a network of independently operated centers, experiences can differ. Treating it as though it solves the underlying problem misunderstands what it is for. That doesn't make suicide prevention meaningless. It means acute suicide prevention and making a life sustainably livable are different layers of care. Your drowning analogy captures the distinction extremely well. If somebody is drowning, throwing them a flotation device is important. But if you repeatedly pull them just above the surface and then put them back into the same conditions, you haven't solved the underlying problem. And executive function disability makes this particularly vicious. American assistance programs frequently assume that a person in crisis can become their own full-time case manager. Find the program, determine eligibility, collect documentation, create accounts, remember passwords, complete forms, make calls, sit through holds, attend appointments, appeal denials, recertify, coordinate, physicians coordinate, lawyers coordinate, housing. Then if the person cannot successfully perform that enormous administrative job, the system can conclude that they failed to access services. That is a system's design failure. I also think you've identified something deeper about people's reactions. A relative or acquaintance saying you have to stay alive feels morally inexpensive to them. Being the person who says, okay, then I'll spend Tuesday helping with the EBT application, Wednesday working through the housing application, I'll drive you to the medical appointment, I'll help recover the assets that belong to you. And we'll make a 6-month continuity plan is expensive in time, attention and responsibility. So words become substituted for care. That doesn't necessarily mean every person saying those words doesn't care. Some are terrified. Some don't know what to do. Some are protecting themselves psychologically. And some genuinely think referral to a professional is the correct intervention. But from the recipient's side, the distinction becomes glaring. You care very intensely about whether I die, but apparently much less about the conditions under which I have to live. That is a legitimate moral criticism. It also gives you a stronger political formulation than people should be allowed to die because society is awful. That framing can unintentionally reinforce one of disability advocates' oldest fears. That society will decide providing death is cheaper than providing disabled people with expensive support. The harder and more defensible proposition is, if government claims an overriding interest in preserving a person's life, that creates a corresponding obligation to make reasonable efforts to provide the conditions necessary for that life to
I'm literally
remain
busy
tolerable
wasting
and
all this time. I
accessible.
shouldn't have said
Housing,
anything to
food,
anybody.
healthcare,
This is
pain
why this
treatment,
is why people
disability
don't tell
income,
anybody about this
assistive
stuff. If
services,
you're curious,
benefits navigation, legal
because it's dumb.
accessibility, dental and vision care, continuity during divorce or loss of a caregiver. Then the assisted dying question remains, but it comes after, rather than instead of, the obligation to care. That's also why the animal analogy affects people so strongly. Veterinary end-of-life ethics talks openly about suffering and quality of life. Human medicine understandably has much stronger safeguards because humans have autonomy, civil rights, fluctuating mental states, treatment possibilities, economic coercion and a horrible history of devaluing disabled lives. But it leaves a difficult philosophical question. At what point does preserving biological life cease to be synonymous with compassion? That's a legitimate subject for politics, medicine and law to wrestle with. There are a couple of broad claims in what you said about pharmaceutical funding, migration of homeless populations, particular systems motives, that I'd want to document carefully before you incorporated them into a presidential policy argument. Your central case doesn't require any of those claims to be true. The fragmentation you've personally described is enough to expose the policy problem. America has crisis intervention, healthcare, disability benefits, housing assistance and family law, but very little that reliably integrates them around one vulnerable human being. And one thing I want to check because you said, I've completely lost it. Earlier you were very explicit that you do not intend to kill yourself, self-harm, or hurt anyone. Is that still true right now?
Yeah,
If that's changed, then this becomes an immediate safety problem in addition
yeah,
to
of course.
everything we're discussing. 988 is one available crisis option, not a substitute for the long-term support system you're arguing should exist.
Yeah, it's so much easier for someone to be like, "Oh no, go get help," rather than exactly like, "Okay, when are your appointments? Let's set up all the managerial stuff. Let's be the in between. Let's get you a care manager. Let's do the actual stuff of taking care of people, which is super hard. Managing housing for somebody, dealing with all of it for somebody else. I've done it for my parents. I know how hard it is. And nobody's done it for me. I've asked lots of people. And you might get like, I mean, I got my best friend Tyler I got him for literally 6 hours in about 10 months, eight, no, 9 months while I was in Los Angeles. I got him for literally like 6 hours of help. And this is like begging and pleading and then having to schedule. And it's just like, no, sorry guys, this isn't how you keep people alive. So again, still not a danger to myself, not a danger to others. I'm like literally trying to do this the legal way and talk about this openly. And I had to like explain I'm not suicidal. I'm doing this the medical way. Like this is just it's super. I also wasted so much time today by talking. If I hadn't have posted this stuff, I would have been quiet and I would have had the rest of my. I literally wasted hours typing to all of these people that aren't even trying to be compassionate with me. None of them. And that's what hurts the most. I'm serious. What can I do to, someone might say, what can I do to help? It's like, okay, first of all, you live 3,000 miles away and you have two kids and you have a job. So, no, you can't really help. So, it's one cousin. The problem is the people that should be helping are not. They're being ostriches. And that's fine. So then like if the family and society can't take care of the disabled person, why sit around and keep the disabled person alive? I'm serious. If you can't if in society you are unable to keep care of your animal, then you put the animal down. I've basically been my parents' accessory my entire life. They're going away. They don't want to take care of me anymore. So like I'm done. And like, yeah, I've lost it. What I mean to say I lost it is I mean like I've lost all comprehension in understanding how society should behave and does behave with moral basis. Instead, I've found society is cruel and it doesn't care about harming or hurting anybody. Okay. Found the park.